We are in Aramoana, a very calm beachfront city of Wellington, New Zealand. Everyone goes through their day very slowly. Nothing really ever happens here. The police officer Nick arrives at the office where he greets his partner, the officer Stu. While Nick has breakfast, he asks Stu if the cases he's going through are linked. Julie Ann and her boyfriend Gary are talking about how they will let their kids know about the fact that they're planning to move in together and live as a big family. When the news arrives to their kids during a meal, it is not especially well received, but they accept their parents' wishes. Meanwhile, there's a man named David Gray who's at the bank complaining about how he's been asked to pay a $2 fee for a transaction. Getting angrier by the minute, he states that he has never been charged for something like that before. His erratic behavior got him kicked out. Then David goes to a store where they sell weapons where he ends up buying a rifle. At home, David sits down to read a magazine about guns, and we see that Stu is actually there to let him know that people have seen him sneaking around at night. David doesn't say a word to that, and then suddenly he has to get up because someone is knocking on his door. David gets a flashback of some people with many dogs entering his house. He's scared, so he avoids opening the door, even though the person behind the door says they just have mail for him. Which makes us understand that David is imagining everything. Stu isn't there, and neither are furious dogs waiting to come inside his house. The mailman slides the mail through the door, and when David grabs it, he breaks it to pieces. Then he makes sure that the door is very secured, and he stands close to it holding his rifle. Gary, who's the father of 3, is out fixing the bike of one of his daughters. Chiquita comes out to help him, but she steps in front of David's property to get there. David is feeling paranoid and opens the door to tell her to get off his property. Gary steps in and tells David not to yell at his daughter. David gets inside, and when he opens the door again, he shoots Gary multiple times. The neighbors hear this, but they think it's just someone playing with fireworks. Gary's kids saw what happened, so they ran to hide inside their house, but David went there to shoot them. Even though Chiquita was shot, she managed to run away and get to Julie Ann, Gary's girlfriend's home, to ask for help. Julie Ann gets her in the van and drives to Gary's house. She sees that the house is burning. Julie Ann is forced to leave because David started shooting their van, but she promises to come back with help. A man who's chilling with his friends having a barbecue party notices the sound of backfire, and when he turns to look in the direction in which he hears this, he finds that it comes from Gary's place. The man notifies this to his neighbor and says he'll find Tim to help, but in the meantime he tries to use the hose to put out the fire. However, David shoots the hose, making the man run away and warn his friends. Soon the word got around that there's a man with a gun and everyone should leave to avoid getting shot. However, there's 2 old people who don't seem concerned with this, and they keep casually walking. David spots them and shoots them. The man got shot, but they're still alive, so the old lady manages to use all her strength to get back up and walk to his house to see if her son was there. He was not. So she calls the police to report on the shooting. The police officer Nick receives the call, and the old lady crawls back to where the man is. An ambulance and the police arrived. Gary's house was still burning. Nick positions himself with a rifle out of the house in a strategic place, while Stu goes analyzes where he can enter David's house. David is putting on black paint on his face to communicate that he's in a war against them. Stu calls the police station to tell them that they need the full staff at Aramoana. When the man arrives, Nick tells Russ to go around the south side, and indicates to Darren to go back to the car radio to let Stu know that they're in position. Nick adds that if Stu gives him any orders to tell him what they are. Nick is hiding behind some bushes waiting for orders, but a woman named Vanessa is lying on the ground asking for his help. Nick asks if she can move to him, but the woman says that she can't move her legs. Suddenly gunshots are heard, but she's still alive and asks if he has seen Stacy, which is her daughter. Nick hasn't seen them, so Vanessa tells him to please save them. On the other side, the old lady has to use the phone again because the ambulance hasn't arrived in their area and the man who got shot particularly needs it. The ambulance tells her to stay safe inside her home and not come outside again. Some men pass right by where the shot man is and they give him a blanket, but tell him that they can stay since they need to find their kids. David sets his house on fire and breaks the windows to get out. One of the police officers tells David to stop right there, but David runs away with his rifle in hand. Stu communicates that something exploded in the house, which is making him very nervous. And then Nick sees him. David is shooting Stu right in front of his eyes. Nick wants to shoot David, but his hands are shaking, so he lets him go. After David is gone, Nick comes close to his partner and the rest of the officers come around. Since Ala Moana has been sealed, no firefighters were able to make it there to put down the fire, and now it's notorious that it has grown greatly. Officer Nick and Paul find the courage to enter David's house. They take away all of the weapons they can find there. David is patrolling the area, waiting to wipe out the next person that comes across his path. Then Paul and Nick find Stacy, who was hiding in a car truck. She says that Leo and Dion, the boy next to her, are asleep. Nick says that one of them has to go to get help. Paul tells him to go, and with that he leaves, but not before letting Vanessa know that Stacy is still alive. But Stacy says to Paul that her tummy, which could be indicative that she got as well. Reinforcement arrives and Nick goes straight to help Vanessa get out of there, but she is not moving anymore. They do get Stacy to the ambulance, because even though she looks weak, she's still holding onto her life. The old lady listens to the sound of her dog named Patch barking, and she opens the door to let him inside. David returned to his house, but he noticed that the police took away all his weapons. So he sits down to eat some tuna from a can and turns the radio on to see if they mention anything about. And after a while he turns the lights off to fall asleep on his bed. Just as if he was going through a normal day. The next day a special police department sent a helicopter to find David more easily. David made it to the front of the old lady's house. So she's trying to hold her dog's muzzle in hopes that he doesn't make any sound that could put David on alert. Meanwhile, the news is reporting everything related to the tragedy. Thankfully for the old lady, David moves to another house which he breaks into. He goes through a crisis and cleans the paint from his face. But he stays there in silence until the moment the police come and he starts to shoot. They have to throw in some tear gas inside to try to make him stop shooting. After some time of holding his breath, David is forced to come out, and that's when he finally gets shot by the police. But he doesn't die immediately. They make sure to tie him up and then he dies. Then the special police department finds the old lady and her dog in her house, and they make sure to get her to the hospital where she reunites with her family. This story was based on actual events.